Hello, everyone. This is Aisha. I am the events coordinator at MEMO. I'm also I also handle our annual Palestine Book Awards. And welcome to another episode of MEMO's Conversation. Today we have another special author or writer with us today, Wafa Ghnaim. Her book Tatreez Tea, Embroidery and Storytelling in the Palestinian Diaspora was nominated for Palestine Book Awards 2018. Um, Today we're going to interview her on this book, obviously, and what has happened after writing the book, why she wrote the book, and all of that. Wafa Ghnaim is a Palestinian-American. She's also a businesswoman, writer, artist, and researcher, all of these things and many more. And she's also a New York Foundations for the Arts Fellow since 2018. And let's start, Wafa. How did you begin with embroidery? Why embroidery? Tatreez, all of that. Just the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, first of all, for having me and for being interested in my story. I started learning Tatreez at a really young age. My mom, Farial Abbasi Ghnaim, she has been teaching Tatreez and art in general. She's an art teacher, she's certified to teach. So she taught in the Middle East, in Syria and Jordan, in the UNRWA refugee camps after she completed her college degree. And so she's always been a teacher. And when she immigrated to the US and had me and my two sisters, her first order of business, besides teaching us how to eat and teaching us how to get dressed, was teaching us Tatreez. And so I really don't have any memories in my life where Tatreez was not a part of it. It's part of my earliest memories. I always, me and my sisters were always with my mother. She never put us like in daycare or anything like that. So whenever she went to work or do a festival or do a demo or teach a class, Tatreez class, she brought me and my sisters along, and we would demonstrate by pulling waste canvas, which is one of the techniques that Palestinian women use to produce the thobe. So that's really where it all started for me. I spent a large part of my life not really fully connected, I think, to my identity as Palestinian in America. I think there was so much focus around me in school of how different I was. I'm very tall. I'm very tall, 6'3", now, but I've always been tall. I had a funny name, all of these things. And, I always worked at trying to fit in and trying to belong. And so I spent most of those early years doing that. It wasn't really until after college that I decided I wanted to do more to connect with my identity. I had been traveling to visit my family in the middle. It wasn't like I was totally secluded. I was definitely Arab, but the Palestinian side is what really needed the connection. And Tatreez started to reemerge in my life.
That's beautiful. How did you take it from this? Like you said, being with your mom and just growing around all of this to become such a popular online platform, your Tatreez Tea, like the whole concept. And then later on the book and your classes and all of that. How did it become this big online platform?
That's a really, really good question. And I'm really thankful for the attention Tatreez Tea has been given over the years. Back when I started the account, I think it was like 2016 or 2015, there was really not a lot online about Tatreez. It wasn't hashtagged, it wasn't cool. Like there was no real trend to it in the social media world. And I guess my whole premise for starting the account was just to share my work on the book, my Tatreez. I wanted to share my mom's Tatreez. I just wanted to have kind of like a scrapbook online about all the work I'm doing to produce the book. And it's just kind of naturally grown from there. I think that, I've like since expanded, I have like Tatreez Tuesdays, where on Tuesdays I share quotes or anything sort of art historical about Palestinian embroidery. On Instagram, I do TikToks. I try to repost other artists or other art historians who are preserving this art form. So I think like I've just diversified in the reach that I've had, and I think that people are really open to that. But I think Tatreez and tea kind of has a ring to it a little bit. I think we all love tea and we all love Tatreez, and together it just makes it so appealing. And so there's that. But I think too, like I do want to speak to why I use the term Tatreez. Like why is it that I use Tatreez and not the word embroidery? It seems really like redundant, like we'll just say embroidery. And I guess I've heard this over the years, so that's why I wanted to speak to it, is that embroidery I didn't learn embroidery, first of all. Like when my mom was teaching me and my sisters, she was teaching us Tatreez. And she was teaching us Tatreez bil Arabi. She wasn't teaching us in English. So I don't know this art form as just embroidery. To me, embroidery is like a global art form, and it's connected to many different cultures. To me, Tatreez falahi, Tatreez Palestini is it's our art form. And so that's why I really went with the word Tatreez. Tea was meant to be symbolic of the storytelling traditions. I say it in the book, of the storytelling traditions and kind of the culture of it. So like there's a ritual to the way this art form is passed on from mother to daughter. And the tea is the vehicle of that. Of course, halwiyat and, all the sweets that we eat, like that. But like mama used to make a pot of tea and sit us down and tell us what she wanted to tell us. So I wanted to connect the meanings of the Tatreez and the stories in some way in the book.
Yeah, and also I feel like in this end of the world, we love tea a lot in England. So it does have like a real ring to it here. Like I remember the first time I read it, it really stuck in my head. Yes. Okay.
Well, that's good to know, because I have a whole like moleskin journal just covered and like brainstorming titles for my book, and then the subtitle for the book. Oh my God, it took me almost 3 months of daily writing down of ideas and journaling to figure out what I was going to call it. At some point I wanted to do Palestinian lifelines. Like, I don't know what I was doing. If you go look at the journal, you'd be like, what is this? But then finally I was like, I think it's just Tatreez and tea. And my friend was like, bingo. I was like, okay, I got it.
But to be honest, my best part about your book is the title. Like everything else is amazing, but I really love the name. Like even your Instagram page, Tatreez and tea, has a ring to it. It's simple. It's storytelling without like so many things linked to it. Just very simple storytelling of Tatreez and all of that. Going back to your book, you discuss the roots of Tatreez and how they're linked to biblical times. You want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a good question. So just to like kind of create like a little bit of a transition, my book was really written in this format that meant to document oral history. So I didn't approach it as an academic research project. I didn't do like art historical research. I just documented oral history traditions in my family and the patterns that are connected to those stories. So after I released the book, I started to take a greater interest in research, and and now I'm actively working towards candidacy for an art history PhD. I'm not in a program yet, but that's ultimately my goal in the next couple of years. And so I've taken just a greater focus the last couple years on looking at what is the existing research out there, what are, you know, gaps of information that we should learn. I mean, so when we talk about like the biblical period and things like that, there's really not a lot we know. I mean, there really is not. I mean, these dresses, these thawab, women were married and buried in. So some, you know, some makers of the, you know, taksira jacket and Bethlehem, you know, with the couching stitch that Tahriri used to joke and say, like, my best work is underground, because Palestinian women were buried in these dresses. So we have a limitation in terms of the actual artifacts. But what I was finding really interesting and is the extent to which Tatreez falahi is represented in European paintings of the biblical period, because we do have some European artists, French artists, English painter like William Holman Hunt and James Tissot and various other European painters who have traveled to, at the time it was called the Holy Land, right? Yeah. And they painted what they saw. But they also painted, I mean, there's also this kind of this infusion of what they saw into their depiction of like biblical scenes, which is really interesting. You know, it's interesting that before this was really a politicized subject, the baseline assumption was that the clothing that was worn in the region was reflective of a centuries old tradition. There wasn't this question as to legitimacy or this, you know, this questioning of like Palestinian claim to the land. You know, there wasn't any of that kind of politicization that we see today that is, you know, ultimately meant to like, you know, perpetually dispossess us from not only our land, but also our heritage and our tradition. So in the absence of that at the time, it's a really interesting idea to think that it is true that Tatreez existed during the biblical period. Do we have solid evidence? Maybe not yet a full breadth of, you know, academic or scholarly evidence, at least in my opinion and what I've seen. Is this an area that we should continue to research and develop? Yes, absolutely. There's also many other connections that we see. I mean, the biblical period is one thing, but it's so important because we're talking about Bethlehem, we're talking about Bethlehem, we're talking about Jerusalem, we're talking about these major pilgrimage sites for the three Abrahamic religions. You know, it was a holy land for many people throughout the centuries that went to Palestine. So I think that there's room to expand on that research 100%, because because I have a great fascination in really drilling down and seeing how far we can go back on this.
It is very interesting, but what do you think is lacking? Like, how can we get more evidence and more data? Like, what do you think would help us find more evidence?
So, I mean, for me, I would like to start where I'm starting isn't necessarily where I'm ending. And I was just actually talking about this yesterday about how this research and like sort of my path into researching this is going to evolve as it goes, because I'm not sure where it's going to take me. I want to go wherever this research will take me. Where I'm starting is to identify and understand existing artifacts that have not yet been identified. I mean, we have a significant influx of Palestinian embroidery in major museums around the world after the 1970s, after the 67 war. And there's many collections in these major authoritative museums around the world that have no description that says Palestinian, or it's called Syrian. It's like misidentified. And, you know, there's no further information. So I think the first real step is to preserve the integrity of this historical record that that exists, and just ensuring that that artifacts that are out there are identified. Furthermore, I think that we can take a greater interest in, or like I can take a greater interest in my research in researching the artifacts of families, like, you know, that are out there that I'm not there to buy, I'm not there to collect. I'm just there to ask questions and to take photographs and to try to preserve the stories that they've connected. So that's why I felt like Tatreez Tea has been such a big foundation for me in my research, because it was a full-on 450-page book effort of preserving the oral history of one family, my family. And I can continue to do that for other families throughout my research. And hopefully, as I continue to do that, I preserve this history for our diaspora community as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. You also mentioned that it was very hard finding evidence for embroidery before the 19th century. Why was that hard? Is it?
Well, I mean, the first reason definitely is that women were married and buried in these dresses. So that's one. Two, we unfortunately dedicate so much, like we weigh so much onto photographs, and photography was invented in the mid 1800s or whatever. At least one that would be able to travel, like traveling photography didn't come until decades later after the camera was created, because the camera originally was created for like medical purposes. It was meant to just say, like, you know, for scientific reasons. It wasn't meant for capturing life or traveling. So that took a while. And then I think that we're talking too about, we're not necessarily talking, when we're talking about Palestinian embroidery, we're not always just talking about a region, like this is the border and these are the countries. We're talking, there's a significant portion of Palestinians that are Bedouins and that have no clear connection to a particular plot of land. Their connection is to the community, and their community is a traveling community. There's movement to their community. And so it didn't matter what that Palestinian borders were. It was that they moved into Egypt and then they moved into, so that there's a general kind of movement that even in Syria, we don't have a lot of research. We barely, for the little we have on Palestine, we have maybe an eighth of that on Syria. And the Syrian embroidery traditions are mostly defined within the context of the Ottoman Empire. And as we know, yes, the Ottoman Empire, 500-year rule, but also Syria has been around for centuries before that, and have had traditions for centuries before that. So I think it's just really more about our historians taking greater interest in our traditions before the modern period, because 19th century is the modern period. So if current researchers, because I'm interviewing with PhD students all the time, I'm interviewing with journalists all the time. I mean, I'm inside all these different kinds of avenues of research that are happening around the world right now. They're asking me questions, and so much focus is on the modern period before 1948. So we're talking 1850 to 1948. And this window is very limiting. We need more research on post-1948, and we need more research on pre-1850. If we could go crusades, let's go crusades. I mean, we got to go back. And I think that there just needs to be more research interest, but we're so, and I'm sorry to keep going off, but we're so defined right now by the conflict, but I hate the conflict. I hate when people say that, but by the Israeli occupation and the dispossession of our land, as we should be really focused on this period and making sure we preserve that. But there does have to be some greater effort to look a little bit beyond our period of colonization, and to really investigate our roots in a more ancient context.
Thank you. That was very insightful. And it's
Oh,
it's even like for like the non-researchers, like the normal, like me, for example. It's also nice to start looking at these things because I just admire Tatreez and just like associate them with regions and stuff. But like now I feel like we're gonna think more about them. This is what I felt after reading your book. I'm like, okay, no, I have to think more. It's not just how they look and stuff. Thank you.
and that's it. That was one of the big points of my book. Like the main contribution I was trying to make, one of them with my book, was to break our mind out a little bit from the village to village. Like, oh, is that from Bethlehem? Oh, is that from Yafa? Oh, is that from, I don't know. These were preserved in my family, and now we're in diaspora. My mother learned Tatreez in the diaspora. In 1952, she started learning. So it's like some of these patterns, like it's, you know, and I'm not saying there isn't value in the village to village distinction. It's very much valuable, but I wonder sometimes if that there's too much focus on that to the point that we can't, we're limiting our capacity to understand the real depth of knowledge that these motifs carry, because some of these motifs are as deep as, I mean, they go back to 5000 BC, and these are global, some of them are global iconographies that connect us to the global community. So the village to village distinction is important to a certain extent in the historical timeline, but that there's just so much more to say.
Yeah, thank you. Now that we've discussed the book a little bit and the historical part of it and all of this, my question comes to you. What has changed after writing the book? What has changed in you personally, to the book, to the work itself, the preserving of the Tatreez and all of that?
I think I've just taken a greater interest on the scholarly side. You know, I feel really passionately about the art history side of this. You know, I love the community of students that I've created online and cultivated, and that this community has built, you know, and it's such a wonderful pleasure to be able to work with those students. I feel my greatest calling is in the research, and anyone who knows me knows I grew up volunteering at the library. Like my nose is in the books, and I'm not always very good like with the social side of things. I mean, I love social media, I love connecting with people, I love teaching, but my nose is really in the books, and that's really where I'm going. I've applied to research grants and research proposals. Hopefully in this time of Corona, they'll still be funded in order to investigate these artifacts that are at you know, museums that I've identified, private collections. And so I'm hoping that that's going to be my next move, is publishing. Well, I am working on a children's book because I have a kid, and I'm like, why isn't there a book on Tatreez? Like, only Tatreez.
Yeah.
And you know, because he's always like, Mom, I want to learn Tatreez. Like, what's Tatreez? And it's like, I need to come up with a rhyme for this. And I was like, ding. And then so there's that. And then I'd like to go, you know, jump that and go to academia and like really focus on these textile objects that I've found that are really they're truly unidentified. I mean, there's literally no name except for the donor's name, which is a Jewish name or an American name. There's no connection to a Palestinian. So I'm hoping that that's really my next place to go.
That is amazing. Since quarantine, you've changed a lot of your classes and stuff, and the whole isolation. What has been your favorite project during quarantine?
Oh, that's such a good one. I have all my projects up here. So my favorite one right now is we just finished our first cohort, but it is the Village Series project. This is my project.
Oh, this is so beautiful.
Thank you. It's 13 classes, and each class we focus on a motif. I mean, and there's a couple classes we do 2 motifs, but they're each from different villages. I think it's a total of 16 motifs, or no, 16 villages, 14 motifs. And it's so cool. Every week that we have a class, we focus on just one pattern. And one of my students in the last class, like our very last final presentation class, she said, it feels like that week we meditate on that village and we stitch in their memory. And that is just, it was so powerful. I got chills because I do an art history lecture in the beginning of every class. Like, this is the village. This is what it was known for. This is how Palestinians lived in this village. This is how it was depopulated. This is its depopulation story. And this is their style of Tatreez. And this is their pattern. And it's just, is such a powerful experience. So the village series is cool. And I actually do have the current cohort that starts tomorrow. Cohort 2 is sold out, but I did schedule cohort 3. It starts December 5th. So if people want to check it out, it's on my website. My other one that I really love, if I'm going to be honest, is my denim jacket series that's starting in November. I designed this beautiful pattern that includes all the different star motifs of Palestine. And it's all these different villages, all like in a night sky, like a starry night, but Palestine style. So those are like my 2 favorites right now.
They're really amazing projects. So the one that represents the villages, the piece that you just showed me is really beautiful. The green in it is just really beautiful.
Thank you. Well, this is me. I did the greens. I was did a hike like over the summer. I found a rose garden, but it had like a big hike. And I went hiking and I took pictures of all this greenery. And I got one picture that was like 6 different greens. And so I was like, that's my village series project. So I matched my threads to it. But the class, I focused the first class on color selection because everyone has a different, experience. So we try to make sure everyone's is totally different.
I think you should quote her, the student who told you that they meditate as if they're meditating for the village. I think you should put it as a quote and post on your Instagram. It's such a beautiful quote and such a beautiful way to look at it as well. Because even Tatreez itself is very peaceful. Like, it helps you meditate, it helps you focus a little bit, and then linking it with that is just really beautiful. They're really beautiful. I think we'll link your website on the comments below if someone wants to join your classes and stuff. That's it on my end. But is there anything else you'd want to add?
No, I mean, I think, for anyone who, well, first of all, if anyone's interested in the village series, it's you just want to have taken a beginner class. That's it. Like at least one beginner class or a free class that I've taught. As long as you took one of those, you should be good on the village series. I do have a lot of other classes on my website, so you guys can check all those out. And then just as like a general thing, like if you're not interested in learning Tatreez, you can still support this art form by just educating yourself about what these different patterns mean and just, continue to advocate and help Palestinians continue to reclaim this art form. So you can still be an ally in this work, even if you don't want to learn embroidery itself. And I hope that I'll see you all on Instagram. And thank you so much to everybody for being so, for asking me these questions, for being so interested in this work.
Thank you so much for joining us. And don't forget, when you write your children's book, to submit it for our Palestine Book Awards. I don't know what year it will be, but we'll definitely want that. We're always on the look for, we don't have that many children's books, and I think they're also very important. Our last interview was a children's book. I don't know if you know the book, Baba, What Does My Name Mean? It's a really beautiful book.
Yes, I love that book. I know, and Ravik, I know her. Her and I are constantly talking on Instagram, and I got the signed version of the book. It's such a beautiful book.
Yes. Thank you so much. Again, it's been very nice talking to you and getting to know all of this. Your book was amazing. And all your work is nice. I love your Instagram. I think everyone, if they have a moment to check your Instagram, your website, like you said, you don't have to do Tatreez. Just check out the page and you'll learn so much. Thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you in another nomination.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye.